mythology story, and I can't remember how it all goes, but you'll know where I'm going with this. That it's like one of the creatures, one of the beings, one of whatever it is, gets wings made of feathers or something, and they can fly, and then they fly up to the universe, and then the way they end up going too close to the sun or something, and they think of their brightness, and they go too close to the sun. I can't remember how the story goes, and then of course feathers in the sun and whatever. Anyway, out of that, we have a phrase that we often use: flying too close to the sun. It comes from that Greek mythology story, and the whole idea of the phrase that is used when we're saying flying close to the sun means, man, this is a perilous journey. You're in some danger here. This is not the safe spot to be. I feel like this morning I'm going to be flying close to the sun. This is not the safe space. This is not the easy space. This is not the like, hey, this is all calm and good. No, the topic we have before us is difficult. It's not a feel good. This is not like we all go away, go and feel good about ourselves, high five each other on the way out, and hoorah. Because this is one of the central points of life, and it's also one of the most difficult points of life. We're looking this week, of course, this year, at being faithful. Not just faithful, and it's spelt deliberately wrong. It's that we ought to live our life full of faith. That faith isn't just something that is for salvation. We need faith to trust Jesus, and then beyond that, we just live. We just live however we want to live, and we continue on. But as long as we have faith in Jesus. No, before we see Jesus face to face, every aspect of our life ought to be governed by faith in God's Word. And so some things that we're going to be dealing with this morning are difficult, and they're hard. And I have been praying all week, God, would you help me for this to be a blessing and a strength and an encouragement? And would you just help this, God? That's been my prayer. It's still my prayer. Maybe you can pray as well this morning. God, would you help in this area and just give wisdom and the right words and all of those things. But a marriage here. Marriage, it's God's intent. It's what God intends. We looked last week and planned this out from the very beginning of the year to look at different subjects around being faithful. We're going to look, just so you know, we're going to look faithful with the gospel coming up in the next month or two, looking at what it means to be faithful with the gospel, faithful with the Bible, faithful in marriages and in relationships. All these things we ought to be living by faith in. So we have this, a faithful marriage. And I'm not just talking about being faithful to your spouse, where that's probably oftentimes how it's looked at, we're going to be faithful to your spouse. I'm looking at it from a different angle this morning, that faith ought to be a major part of our marriage. It should be every part of our life, and it ought to be a part of our marriage. We looked last week at gender roles, that to be faithful in the gender that God has placed us in, that there is distinction, there is shared humanity between a male and a female, between Adam and Eve. There is shared humanity there. And they share the role of dominion of this earth. We looked last week that the dominion of this earth, or the commandment that God has given to mankind as male and female, as found in verse number, chapter 1. If you're there, you can look at chapter 1. And in verse number 28, he says, and God blessed them, the man and the woman, the male and the female, the Adam and the Eve. He blessed them, and God said unto them, be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea and over the fowl of the air and over every living thing that moveth upon the earth. We looked at that last week, that's what God's intent wasn't just for the man. That was God's intent for the man and the woman, for mankind, was to populate, to cultivate, and administrate. To have this world, to populate it, to fill it. He formed this earth to be inhabited, and then we are to cultivate it, we are to subdue it, to bring it under control, and then administrate the laws of God, to administrate upon it, to act in the authority of God upon this earth. That's the role of what God has placed mankind on this planet. There's order and structure. And we looked last week that He formed man, He placed the man into the garden and gave him a job to dress it and to keep it. And then He said, it's not good that man should be alone, but it should be that there is no help that was meet for him, a suitable help for him. And God deliberately brings the animals before Adam. So in comes the elephant. And God is saying, here's an elephant. And He is saying, the ears are too big. Shoe size, way too big. This is not going to work. And then comes the giraffe. No, too tall for me. And then in comes the lizard, and in comes the monkey, and in comes all of this. And He's naming them, and He's doing His job. But amongst all of them, the Bible says there was not found a help meet for him. Not suitable. None of those were really suitable. So God puts him to sleep. Deliberately, God does all this. He's not going, oh, okay, what am I going to do here? Oh, what about this one? What about this one? Adam's like, no, God's not going, oh. It's a deliberate play because God is saying, this is not for you. I have something better for you. Puts Adam to sleep. And from his rib, He forms the woman. Breathes into her nostrils the breath of life, or breathes in Adam's. There is now Eve, and brings Eve. And then Eve comes after the giraffe, and after the monkey, and after the lion, and after that, in comes Eve. Eve comes to Adam. And you could just imagine Adam. Yes, that's the one. That's the one. Yes. And there's great excitement. It's like he's saying, whoa, yes, the woman, yes. She shall be bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh. We shall call her woman, and named her woman. And so you have this, that He names her woman, and they're later known as Eve. But there's something in it that He goes, then this is the one, this is the companion, this is the help that is suitable for me. And Eve is made and brought together to Adam. But it's not just that they are now sharing the garden, because God's intent is deeper than that. Is that it's not just that He's out dressing and keeping it, and she comes alongside to help him in his task that God has given to him. Though that is all part of it, there is here in verse 24, God says, so Adam says in verse 23, this is now bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh. And she shall be called woman because she was taken out of man. Verse 24, God speaks, and we have the institution of marriage laid out here. Therefore shall a man leave his father and his mother and cleave unto his wife, and they shall be one flesh. This is the intent of God, is that it's not just that man and woman cohabitate together, but that a man and a woman would be joined in marriage, in a marriage covenant with vows before God, that there is some commitment that takes place. And there are three aspects to this. Just like the first one, commandment to mankind was to populate, cultivate, and administrate upon this earth, now you have marriage, and He gives three things in here. Therefore shall a man leave his father and mother. We mentioned these last week, but I want to just put a little bit more emphasis on it this morning. Therefore shall a man leave his father and his mother, and shall cleave unto his wife, and they shall be one flesh. Someone creatively put it into leave, cleave, and weave, which is what the intent, God's intent from the very beginning, God's intent of marriage is to leave, cleave, and weave. Even before, Adam wasn't leaving anybody, nor was Eve leaving anybody. They didn't have a family to leave from, but God was showing the pattern that was going to come hereafter. Was there going to be a leaving, a cleaving, and a weaving? This is the foundation verses for the entire Bible. Oftentimes, Paul is pulled out, and Paul is used to say, well, what do we think about gender roles? And Paul is used, and he said, well, Paul is this, and everyone in the argument is using Paul. Well, he's this and he's that, or he's only writing that because of the goddess over here in this particular city, and he's actually way more open or whatever. But if you read Paul, he bases it upon this. it's not just a principle that is right into a particular church. It's a universal principle that God has set in place from the very beginning of male and female, of marriage, of how God has designed this world to work. So Jesus quotes this, and Paul quotes this passage in Ephesians, and Jesus quotes it in Matthew and in Mark, that a man should leave his father and mother, and the bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh. They reference this passage, both Paul and Jesus. This is foundational to where we are today and how life operates across cultures and across time. It's establishing God's design for marriage in every age. And here is the design. This is what the goal of marriage is supposed to be, and the intent of marriage outlined by God. This is how He says, this is how it should be. This is not how it usually is in the vast majority of marriages. This is how it should be and can be. And God lays this out, what we're about to look at. One is to leave. So the purpose of marriage is to leave. It's to take a man and a woman, they have children, and then that son is to leave his father and his mother and to start not just an extension of that family, but actually its own standalone unit. That's the intent of God. So this does not mean abandoning or dishonoring the parents, because the fifth commandment still stands. You should honor your father and your mother. But what it's actually more referring to is that it's speaking to a change in fundamental loyalty. It's a change in the primary loyalty of those two individuals, where once loyalty was to their family unit, their mother, their father, their brother, and their sister. The leaving is to say, right, we are leaving, we are now separate from that family, and we are starting a new family, and now the primary loyalties is now to his wife and to his children, to his family. There is a distinction in the primary loyalty. I have a mother here and I have a sister here. They are still my family. We are still related, and I still have responsibilities primarily towards my mother and to her as a widow. There's obligations and there is responsibilities to help and to assist and to do those things. My primary loyalty, though, and my primary loyalty. My primary loyalty, though, is to my wife and to my kids. They are my primary loyalty. They are my family. This is the leaving part of things. Someone said it like this, that marriage is not simply adding another person into the existing family. It is creating an entirely new household. When I married Rhiannon, we didn't expand as a Hearst family of Rod, Sally, and now these kids. No, there's a new household that is made. It's not just an expansion of one family, it is the creation of an entirely new household. When Annalise, my other sister, married Danny, it's not just an expansion of the Shives or an expansion of the Hearst family. There is a now new standalone household of Danny Shives and now Annalise Shives, which I think that shared identity, where God calls both Adam and Eve, and he called their name Adam. Even though they're individual, there's a shared identity. And that's placed in there by God. And so now there is a shared identity. Now there is this household that is placed together. That's God's design. So marriage is not simply just adding in. And in one sense, oftentimes at wedding, it's like the speech is made. We want to welcome so-and-so to our family. And the other side of the family, we want to welcome so-and-so to our family. Now, in some respect, there's truth to that, because a family, it does come under that. But again, I want to say, the leaving, they shall leave his father and mother, the loyalties change. The household change as a new household, not merely an expansion of another one. So there is the leaving. There is the cleaving. Now, for some reason, every time I think of cleave, You know what I think of? Exactly. And that's my sister. She did this. Because you know what I think of? Like a butcher's cleaving knife or something. And sometimes marriages end that way. That's not the right kind of cleaving, though. This cleaving is with an A, or maybe that, I don't even know how to spell. This one's with a, anyway, I won't go down the spelling side of things. But cleaving, in this sense, he shall cleave, and shall cleave unto his wife. Cleave means to stick. That's what cleave means. It means to stick, to adhere, to hold to. Let me give you some Bible passages that has the word cleave in it. In Psalms 102 and verse 5, it says, by reason of the voice of my groaning, my bones cleave to my skin. Means he's been so sick that now his bones and his skin feel like they're just cleaving and stuck together. There's no fat between the two of them, and his skin is cleaving to his bones, sticking to his bones. In Psalm 137 verse 6, he says, if I do not remember thee, let my tongue cleave to the roof of my mouth. Stuck to the roof of my mouth. If I prefer not Jerusalem above my chief joy. In Romans 12:9, it says, let love be without dissimulation, without fakery, and without just a mask, but genuine, wholehearted, sincere love. Let love be without dissimulation. Abhor that which is evil, cleave to that which is good. Stick fast to, be joined with that which is good. That's what the word cleave means. Or, as he says in Deuteronomy chapter 10 and verse 20, thou shalt fear the Lord thy God. Him shalt thou serve, and to him shalt thou cleave, and swear by his name. So he is saying, my people ought to cleave to me. We ought to be stuck fast to God. That's the word cleave. And to stick, to adhere, to hold to. So when there is this marriage, it's a leaving of the family, creating a new household, and then there ought to be a cleaving and a sticking together. That there is, marriage is therefore, it's not a picture, marriage is therefore pictured as a permanent covenant attachment. This is not just something that might happen and we'll be together for a little while, and providing what happens, and then depending on the circumstances of life, well, then we will not be stuck together anymore. No, the purposes of marriage, which is one of the most difficult things in this life, one of the purposes of marriages is to stick, to stand fast, to stay together. That's difficult. And that's hard. And now you go down the path of divorce. And now once you raise the issue of divorce, now you're into a very uncomfortable realm. Because we all know that life is difficult. And we know that relationships are difficult. They're not easy. And so I want to be very careful as I tread through this to say, I understand, and I know, and I see, and I've experienced. This is difficult territory to navigate. But we at least should say, and this is what I said last week, the job of the preacher isn't so much to change culture, but it's to address how culture affects the people of God. We ought to think, right? And our thinking should not be shaped by the culture out there. Our thinking should be shaped by God and His Word, whether it's culturally relevant, culturally popular or not. Paul says to Timothy, be instant, preach the Word in season and out of season. You know what he's meaning by in season and out of season? When it's popular and when it's not popular. And there are things that God's Word, we looked at this a few months ago maybe, about following the world on a 50-foot rope, that you have to actually, you take a stand, and the world shifts. Sometimes you get closer to the Word of God, and sometimes it gets further away from the Word of God. But God ultimately and His Word doesn't move. It's the world that gets further away and closer. We ought to stay close to the Word of God. And as man turns his mind against God, he changes his opinions, and he gets further and further. His opinions get further and further away from God. And if you remember, Isaac, I think you had, did we find the globe after all of that? Did you have a globe? Yeah, but you found it. Yeah, so you had the globe and the world came in and out. And And Lewis, if you remember, Lewis was over here with the Bible. He didn't change because God's word doesn't change. It's the world that changes and gets closer or further away and ebbs and flows from the word of God. We as Christians, though, are not supposed to be riding the world back and forth. Our opinion of how things are is supposed to be anchored to God's word. Now, this is where truth and grace ought to go together. You can hold truth in a very unsavory, unkind spirit. But we're supposed to hold truth with grace. Jesus spoke truth and grace, and they ought to balance each other out. We ought not let our love and our grace diminish doctrine and truth, but nor should we let grace and truth diminish our love and our grace. They are equal, they are opposite to each other, but they should balance and hold in tension those two competing, opposed virtues. And so we're supposed to hold to truth. Now, God's word is where we should get our thinking. Now, God's intent from the very beginning is that when this man would leave his father and mother, and ultimately when this lady would leave her father and mother, that they would leave, they would form, and they would stick together. There's a whole heap of reasons why that might come apart, but the intent, at least from the very purposes of God, from the very beginning, was that that sticking was to stay until death do you part. And they're like, we can arrange that. That's not the point. The point is that we're supposed to stay stuck. And in fact, when they came to Jesus and they asked about these things, and they said, well, Moses, can you get divorced for any reason? And I tell you, we are at a stage that they were at, that nowadays divorces are for any reason. Was it back in I should look this up. It's like in the 50s or the 60s, they changed the divorce laws to make it for any cause, basically. Before you had to have there was a lot, anyway, you guys were like, I wasn't looking for a divorce in the 60s. I don't know what you're talking about. Anyway, back in like the 50s or the 60s, divorce was harder. What I'm point is, it's got easier and easier to get a divorce now, all right? Well, it was easy back in Jesus' day, it would seem, that they said, can you get divorced for any reason, for any cause, for if you just don't like him? And she no longer pleases me, we're getting a divorce. And they'd come to Jesus and say, can you get divorced? And Jesus was teaching those things. In fact, hold your place here, go to that verse. We may as well, while we're in this. I was going to go to it in a minute, but we'll go to it now. In Mark chapter number 10. Mark chapter number 10. Matthew, Mark, chapter number 10. I'll jump around in my notes, but I'll reference this later when I was meant to reference it. But Mark chapter number 10. Verse 2 of Mark 10, verse 2. And the Pharisees came to him and asked him, is it lawful for a man to put away his wife, tempting him? Trying to ask the hard questions. Let's see what you do. This is a hard question. Jesus said, and he answered and said unto them, what did Moses command you? Well, Moses suffered to write a bill of divorcement. He allowed it, and to put her away. And Jesus said unto them, for the hardness of your heart, he wrote you this precept. But from the beginning of creation, God made them male and female. For this cause shall a man leave his father and mother and cleave to his wife. And they twain, those two, shall be one flesh. So then they are no more twain, but one flesh. What therefore God hath joined together, let no man put asunder. So from the very beginning, the original pattern he is saying is Moses allowed that, and he allowed it for this simple reason. For the hardness of your hearts. Right, now this is the point that I want to get across this morning, is not to delve into deep things, but just the basics, and just the basic things that happen in life. Here's the reason why divorce happens. Well, it's because of money, it's because of adultery, it's because of this, it's because of divided loyalties, it's because of, no, it's for one reason. The hardness of your hearts. If you have two people with soft, humble hearts, do you think they will fight to the place that they will divide? You think of someone that you know who's spiritual and is humble, and now think of someone else who is spiritual and humble, and put them together. Can you imagine this spiritual, humble person fighting? It doesn't work that way. Because what is the product? Where does contention come from? Only, if you're reading Proverbs, only by blank comes contention. Pride. Only by pride comes contention. You know what pride is? You know what if you spell pride, someone said it like this. If you spell pride, P-R-I-D-E, you know what the center of pride is? I. Do you know what pride really is? I. It's self-centeredness. Now, in marriage, the cleaving, you just stick together. It's that there is going to be problems in a marriage because they don't want to stick together. It really is what the next step is. And they two shall be one flesh. The weaving together. Now, this is where the vast majority of marriages, too many marriages, never get to this stage that God intended. Marriage is supposed to be a blessing. Marriage is supposed to be two people coming together and blessing one another. God instituted marriage to be a blessing, but too often marriage is not a blessing. It feels to people like marriage is a curse. God, you have cursed me in this relationship. Then you've cut the opportunities and you're taking down the exit signs, it seems, and now I'm stuck in this miserable situation. There's a lot of people that are in that location. It's not the intent of God for you to be stuck in misery the rest of your life. It's not God's intent. God's intent is that these two people, oftentimes from completely different settings, environments, situations, come together and are so different, and yet God says there is the ability, and it is my intent, that these two fundamentally different people can actually live harmoniously and woven together in a one flesh manner. Now, oftentimes the one flesh is thought of, well, that has to do with physical intimacy. There is an aspect to marriage that brings people together through physical intimacy. Physical intimacy is not just physical. It is, in its very fundamental state, emotional. It is an emotional bonding together that God intended physical intimacy to be. So when a person goes out, I heard someone explain it to the teenagers one time, or young adults. If you take duct tape that has stickiness on it, and you go and you take the duct tape, or you take the piece of tape and you stick it down, it's really hard, right? It sticks. And then you pull it off. And then you go stick it down somewhere else, and then you pull it off. And then you go stick it down somewhere else, and you pull it off. And you keep doing that. What happens to the stickiness? The stickiness disappears, right? There are people that have gone and they've taken what God intended to stick, and they have lost the complete emotional connection and attachment that is designed by God to be placed within marriage. These things God built to help the sticking together. And in the very beginning, it's actually one of the things that it promotes both the male and the female to say, you know what, I love my mum and dad, but that sticking bit, that one flesh physical thing, that's enough for me to go, hey, I'm into this. We can come together. And so God placed a big dangly carrot of sorts to be like, hey, this is desirable. And God does that. But there are so many other issues that come along that have to be addressed to make this thing actually work. So you have Jesus saying, from the beginning, the intent of God when he designed marriage and he put man together and woman together is for what God has joined together, let no man pull asunder, pull it apart. So the sticking, the leaving and the cleaving, God's intent is to stick. Now, oftentimes this verse, I'm on social media, just like you're on social media. And you know how many times people are using this verse to try and use it as to twist it to turn it into an exit clause? Because people want exit clauses out of their contract. They want an exit clause. How do we get out of this? This is miserable. I want done. And they're looking for the exit clause. And Jesus says this is the intent of God, is that there not be an exit clause, that you actually stay together till death do you part. And you might walk away from that and go, man, this is just soul destroying. And I've mentioned this before, and I don't want to, I've mentioned it before, but struggles that Rhiannon and I have had in the past was this verse that actually helped me go forward in marriage. I got to a stage a few years into marriage, and I've mentioned before, that I got to a stage I thought, this is not going to work. This is, I explained it to someone like this. It's like when you start marriage, you start at this point. And everyone, it seems that everyone just goes up. Every year is better than the year before. And it's like you're just reaching for this mountaintop and it's like, man, this is wonderful. Oh, there's some down bits, but it's just like a continual upwards. This is fantastic. I married my best friend. Oh, we're just like living a Hallmark movie day after day. Well, that's, and some people do. And some people don't. Some people start at marriage, and instead of going up to the mountain, it's like they descend every step further into some dark, abysmal cave. That there doesn't actually seem to be any way out, and all light is gone, and you can't tell up from down and sideways, and all of those things disappeared, and all of a sudden you're in this dark hole that you think, how did I get here? Life was fine before, I was living at least on the surface, and now it's just gradually descended into the abyss. I got to a place in my marriage where I felt like that after a few years. And it was this passage out of Mark that actually helped me, which is a strange thing because I thought am I supposed to be married now? This is going to be miserable for the rest of my life. But it actually gave me hope. You think that's a strange place to find hope. Yeah, you know why I find hope here? Because God's intent wasn't for us to be married and to stay miserably married for the rest of our lives. God doesn't want us to be miserable. The reason he says to stay married is because he actually has the answers for whatever the problems are that are in your marriage. God has the answers. He actually says, my word is sufficient. I don't want you to be miserable. In fact, I have the greatest joy. And I designed this to be joyful and wonderful and good. And I have the answers. Someone said, is it in here or did I just read it? Oh, it is in here. Someone said it like this. It's not the plan of marriage. It's not that the plan of marriage is not working. It's that man is not working the plan. That's good. It's not that the plan of marriage is not working. It's that man is not working the plan. Because not only does God have a plan for marriage, he also has a plan for how this marriage can be successful. And sometimes Christians forget. They just think, well, marriage is of God and he doesn't want me to divorce, so therefore I'm going to be miserable the rest of my life and I'll plug it out till the day I die. That's not the intent of God, is to be miserably married. His intent is that he does have the answers for a good, healthy, strong, joyful marriage for everyone. And it gave me hope. That's a strange place to find hope, but it's like the Holy Spirit was saying to me, hey, it's not that I want you to be miserably married. It's not that I'm against divorce because I want you to be miserable the rest of your life. It's because I actually have the answers for how you can turn this thing around and you can stop descending into the abyss and bring this actually up into the heights, into the clouds and make it good. God has that ability. And it takes faith right there to say, hey, I believe God that he has the answers. And I don't know about you this morning, if I want to give you anything, I actually want to give you hope for some of you that might be thinking, no, this is just hopeless. We don't serve a hopeless God. We serve a God that gives us hope, a God that promises, a God that has the best wisdom, the God that is well able to defeat, well able to win the battles that we are struggling at. God is able, but it's going to take faith. It's going to take faith in God. The second, third part, now I messed my notes up again, is weaving. Do you know how you get, so it's like, you're going to leave, we're going to cleave, stick together, but it's not just a matter of being stuck together. It's actually about these two shall become one flesh. These two are going to be one. Woven is the idea, to be woven together. Have you heard people talk about blended families? He's not saying, you need to be a blended family. You ever thought about what happens when you put something in a blender? If you took an apple and you took a carrot and you put them in a blender, can you tell what is the apple and what is the carrot? No, you've actually lost the distinction and the uniqueness. God in marriage doesn't want us to lose our distinctiveness and our identity and our individuality. He's not saying that you need to be blended together and just be mushed up. Take the blue and you take the pink, sorry, all the two gender colors. The blue and the pink, and you just pour them in together and you stir it all up and we're going to be blended. Well, now you have something different. No, God wants blue and he wants pink. So if you have a blue strand of fiber and you have a pink strand of fiber, you can weave them together, right? Like a rope. You ever pulled a rope apart? You'll find that it's made, and Gemma's never. You're not even 13 yet. You're just starting out in life. All right? When you get older, you'll pull a string apart and you're like, hey, a rope is made of, sorry, Gemma, no, I embarrassed her. But a rope, right? For those that are older and lived a few extra years, you'll know that a rope is multiple strands, right, woven together. Solomon says in Ecclesiastes that a threefold cord is not quickly broken. You can get strength. Now, the same thing with what marriage is, that these two are not to be, that it's not that we lose pinkness and lose blueness. We're supposed to have our own individuality, but we're supposed to be woven together as one. So not that one is wound around the other, and it's not that the pink is round around the blue, and it's not that the blue has the pink round around it. It's that they are interwoven together in this strength, that these two become one. Well, how does that happen? It's very, very hard for the majority of people because it takes humility, and it takes grace, and it takes forgiveness, and it takes submission. All things that are difficult to the human flesh. Things that we want to fight against. You know what the number one cause of divorce is? Pretty much. You ever heard of irreconcilable differences? Do you know what irreconcilable differences is? It is me, myself, and I. They won't do what I want them to do. They won't do what I want them to do. You need to do this. You need to do this. Clash, clash. Right, that's enough. We're done. Well, let's reconcile. These are irreconcilable differences. I ain't budging, and they ain't budging. We ain't budging, and we are gone. That's irreconcilable differences. Because at the end of the day, that's pride. You know what Jesus says? That's the hardness of your heart. And it's because of the hardness of the heart that divorce comes about. If two people, again I say, if two people have soft hearts and malleable hearts before God and before each other, they are going to blend much easier. They're going to be malleable and woven together. But if you get two strings, right, two yarns, string, yeah, whatever that is, yeah, right, or you get two metal rods, which one is better for weaving? Is it not the strings? There's malleability in it, there's movability, there's flexibility in it. But if you have two rods and you're trying to weave them together, you might weave them together, but it's going to take a lot of force and pressure, unnecessarily so, to weave those two things together. Yeah, and then they'll really be stuck. That's not the point, though. The point is that the yarn, the string, is supposed to be malleable and soft, and we're supposed to be woven together. What does it look like to be woven together? Well, it's not blending, it's weaving. It preserves distinctness while creating unity. What weaving looks like in one flesh, it means one purpose. One purpose. It's like, it's not his plans and her plans, it's our plans. It's not, it's one direction. It's walking in the same direction together. Hey, we're going this direction together. That's what it means to have one purpose and to have one direction. It means to have one home, not a shared address, but to actually have one home, that we live together. It's not his possessions and her possessions. It's not his money and her money. It's our possessions and it's our money. I earn money, and Rhiannon stays at home. But I don't have money and she has no money. We have money. If I sell a caravan, we have money from that. If I get a paycheck, we get a paycheck. It's our money. It's not my bank account and her bank account. It's our bank account. We have joint bank accounts, which means when I tap into it, I'm taken away from her bank account. And when she taps into it, she's taken away from my bank account and our bank account. And when we both tap into it, we both have to say, we need to stop tapping into this together because this ain't working very good for us. It goes down pretty quick, right? So we have to get on the same page about our finances. We have to get on the same page about what we're doing and how we're spending our money, because it's not his and hers, it's ours. That's what it means to be woven. That's what it means to be one flesh. It's one joy and one sorrow. It's not my joy and her joy. It's our joy when things go good. It's not my sorrow and her sorrow. It's our sorrow. It's shared joy and shared sorrow. But so often is the case that this is not how people live. Over years and years, and they try and work things out at first, and then they might just give up, and then it just gets to a place where you end up cohabitating in a house. That's not God's intent either. Divorce is not God's intent. Separation is not God's intent. Cohabitating in a house is not God's intent. God's intent is for there to be woven together, one flesh together. And that might mean this. There's going to be some really difficult, hard conversations and a lot of prayer and fasting maybe that needs to go into how can we work through the difficulties and the troubles that we ourselves have brought into this marriage. Someone said it like this. One of the things when I was away, I went away with our marriage. I went away one time for 5 days to pray and to fast and to get alone with God. Not for him to strike down my wife and prove me right, but to actually genuinely say, God, what is the problem here? What is going on? I don't know. I don't know what's happening or where is this? I'll tell you one of the things that he showed me out of that week. And it sticks with me to this day. And I was like, oh, God, that's a little bit too painful. But he was right. And it was this, that this guy that I came across, I mentioned this before, but I lump it all in here together this morning, that he said that marriage is often the happiest day of a person's life. And it's often said that marriage is the happiest day of a person's life. And he says, this is the reason. He says, this is often the reason why marriage is the happiest day. He says, the groom is down at one end of down by the altar with the minister, and he is thinking to himself, I love me, and now this woman is going to come down the aisle and pledge before God and these witnesses to love me as well. And you know what the bride is thinking at the other end of the aisle? She's down the other end thinking, oh, can you believe this? I love me, and I'm going to walk down there, and he is going to pledge before God and these witnesses to love me as well. And that's how often marriages begin. It's the happiest day. It's like, I love me, and everyone else is going to love me as well. And it's happy, but it's also the fundamental problem of why a marriage doesn't work. And God put us into a marriage to expose our own hearts before him and to reveal just how deep this sinful flesh nature goes. Because if this marriage is going to work, we can't do it in our own way and by our own means. We're going to need the grace and the mercy and the forgiveness of God in our lives to make it work. Selfishness is like two rods. You have to be humble. You have to serve. You have to be submissive one towards another. So you're not going to have the one if you're not going to have the weaving, without submission. Can I make a couple of other points? In Exodus chapter number 20, I'm going to give you some practical things here. Exodus chapter number 20. Exodus chapter number 20. Exodus chapter number 20. This is the 10 Commandments. Exodus chapter number 20 and verse number 14. 14. This is good marriage advice. Thou shalt not commit adultery. Okay, that's good. I heard of a pastor one time, or a church. They had one of those digital signs that some churches have out the front, more in America. I haven't really seen it over here. But they had out the front of the church sign on the road, they had underneath it a digital sign that they would change. You've seen the ones where they change it manually? Well, they had a digital one. Well, anyway, they were going through the 10 Commandments. And every week they put up a new commandment. So the first week, they put up the first commandment, thou shalt have no other gods before me. And they put that up there. Second week, they put the second commandment up there. And third week, and so on and so forth. Until they got to, thou shalt not commit adultery. And they put, thou shalt not commit adultery on the church sign. And they got more feedback, calls, saying, how dare you judge? How dare you? Who makes you think you're better than everyone else? And it was like, whoa, someone took this on a little bit personally. But adultery has taken place all the time in our society. Everywhere. Adultery is taking place. And Jesus says, the commandments here is, thou shalt not commit adultery. Okay? Thou shalt not steal. But then he gets to verse 17, the 10th commandment. And he says this, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's house. Oh man, I wish I lived in their house. 2-story, they got the pool, look at the gardens. Oh man, it's so beautiful. Their air conditioning, their carpets. Oh, look at the space that they have. Oh man, I wish I had that. He says, don't do that. Don't be covetous. The 10th commandment is, thou shalt not covet. And he mentions some other things. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife. I find this really interesting because this is different and distinct from the thou shalt not commit adultery. The thou shalt not commit adultery has to do with physical intimacy with someone who is not your husband or your wife. But thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife doesn't have to do with physical intimacy. It actually has to do with coveting. Do you ever look and say, I wish my husband was? I wish my wife was. What do you mean? Well, I wish my husband made more money. I wish my husband was a better spiritual leader. I wish my husband was more funny. I wish my husband was more talkative. I wish my husband would listen more. I wish my husband was like Jane's husband. He's such a wonderful guy, and I wish I had a husband like that. Is it not possible that women, wives, think like that? Okay, what about the men? Is it not possible to say, oh, I wish my wife was better looking. I wish my wife would dress better. I wish my wife was more intellectual. I wish my wife was better with money. I wish my wife would contribute more to our family. I wish my wife would be more considerate about me and listen to the things that I have, that I care about. I wish my wife was more like John's wife. I wish my wife was more like whoever's wife. And you can start thinking. And he says, be careful. Not just be careful. He says, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife. Because it's a danger in a marriage to start looking around and saying, I wish my wife, I wish my husband was like, No. You're not married to so-and-so. You're married to one person. This person. And you need to learn to be content and thankful before God for who God has you married to. Because if you're not, covetousness will kill your marriage. Kill it. And you need to be thankful for your husband. And you need to be thankful for your wife. Even their faults and their failures. Because guess what? You have faults and failures as well. You just don't see them quite as easily as you seem to see the other person. That mirror, it don't seem to work for me. My mirror is just a one-way glass. And we all had that. We look in the mirror, we don't see ourselves, it's a one-way glass, we see the other person, is what I meant by that. So he says, don't covet. Don't covet. Let me put it like this. What's the population of the world today? 8 billion. What's the rough gender division between that 8 billion? Speaking from a Bible perspective here. Gender, 2, right? Male, female, all right? It's 50, yeah. Some will say 49, 51, so let's just say 50, all right? So that means there is 4 billion of the opposite sex in the world. All right? Do you think out of 4 billion people, there is at least one person out there who you might have a better marriage with? That you might get along better? Might be better soulmates? Do you think that's a possibility? Because the guys are, no one's like, everyone's like stiff here, like, I'm not saying anything. I had this conversation with my wife, all right? So we've already had this conversation. I would say that the possibility that there is someone out there that you might be, quote unquote, better soulmates out of 4 billion people, I would say probably a good chance that there's someone out there that you might get along better with than who you are currently married to. I think God knew that as well. And he says, don't covet your neighbor's wife. Don't be looking on the other side of the fence. Rhiannon says it like this: the grass is greener, not on the other side of the fence. The grass is greener where you water it. It's where you water it. It's here. That's good. So don't be covetous. Go to Ecclesiastes chapter number 5. These are all faith-based things. It takes faith to have those thoughts come into your mind and to stop them and say, no, this is against God. I'm going to not be covetous and want and desire someone else or something else. God, help me to be content, because contentment is the cure for covetousness. And covetousness in 1 Corinthians, covetousness is the same as, anybody know? Idolatry. Idolatry is this covetousness. I would say that God does not like and does not take a positive view of covetousness. Ecclesiastes. Sorry, I've got to get there myself. I've got one verse here, but I want to read more than one verse. Ecclesiastes chapter 5, verse 1. Keep thy foot when thou goest to the house of God, and be more ready to hear than to give the sacrifice of fools, for they consider not that they do evil. Be not rash with thy mouth. Don't be quick and sudden with what you're going to say. Be not rash with thy mouth, and let not thine heart be hasty to utter anything before God. For God is in heaven, and thou upon earth. Therefore let thy words be few. For a dream cometh through a multitude of business, and a fool's voice is known by the multitude of words. When thou vowest a vow unto God, defer not to pay it. For he hath no pleasure in fools. Pay that which thou hast vowed. Better is it that thou shouldest not vow than thou shouldest vow and not pay. You know what you do at a marriage altar? Vows. You are pledging. You are making a covenant. And not just a covenant between you and that person that you're standing opposite with. You are making a covenant before God. These vows are made before God. And God does not take lightly in the breaking of vows. Things that you said that you would do, and you made a vow before God and before man. God does not take lightly those things. Why do you think God does not take lightly the breaking of our vows? Think about the nature of God. Theology. Who God is. Does God keep his word? Well, yeah, it's like one of the defining character traits of God. God keeps his word. Man, that's all the way through. Thus saith the Lord. Man, that's God is a God of his word. And you know what he expects his people to be? Men and women of their word. He says, don't vow. It's better. Don't come before God and say you vow till death do us part, and then say, that's a little bit long. That's longer than I anticipated. He says this, better is that thou shouldest, verse 5, that thou shouldest vow and not pay. Sorry, that is not what it says. Better is it that thou shouldest not vow than that thou shouldest vow and not pay. Suffer not thy mouth to cause thy flesh to sin. Neither say thou before the angel. Well, who's the angel? Well, in Malachi 2:7, the priest is known as the angel, the messenger of the Lord, working the things of the Lord. So he says, don't come into the house of God with your vow before God. God, here's my offering, and here's, I'm going to make a vow before you, and here's the priest, and he is offering, here's the working of this vow. And he says, don't come in before the angel, Neither say therefore to the angel that it was an error. So suffer not thy mouth, and don't say before it was an error. Therefore, why should God be angry at thy voice and destroy the works of thine hands? Don't come back here saying, don't come in before him and be all gun-ho and say, here's my offering. Priest, would you offer this before the Lord on my behalf? Because I'm going to make a vow before God. And I'm going to do this, whatever it might be. I'm going to make a vow and I'm going to do it. And then you come back and say, sorry, priest, can you just erase that? Can we just undo that? Because I was way too hasty and I spoke in error. It was a mistake. And I think that's the same thing when it comes to marriage. Don't come back to me if I happen to be marrying you and you're standing here and giving the vows and you're before God and I'm proceeding over it. And don't come back 5 years later. Don't come back 2 weeks later. Don't come back at all. Don't come back and say, I made a mistake. This was an error. God says, I don't like that. That's not what I like. It's better not to vow than to vow and not pay. And I think that with marriage, that we take some vows before God, that God holds us to our word. Jesus defends marriage. We need to deal with covetousness, the importance of the vows. And then Hebrews, go to Hebrews, we'll finish over here in Hebrews chapter 3. Hebrews chapter number 3. Before I read this, let me give you one illustration and then we'll finish up with this Hebrews passage. I heard a preaching one time on marriage, and he said this. He said he went to the Corvette factory in Bowling Green, Kentucky, where they make Corvettes. Massive, big, 11 soccer pitches, big shed that they make it. All right, in one section, there's two sections, right? In the Bowling Green, Kentucky, where they make the Corvettes. There is one where they have the chassis, and they put the engine in, and all the components of that are made in this one section of the shed where the chassis is done. And you have the chassis, the engine, and all that sort of stuff, the wiring. And then there is another section of the shed where the body of the Corvette is made. And they make it and they shape it and they make it beautiful and they double paints and it's all beautiful. And then there's a part of the Corvette factory where the chassis is put together with the body is put together with the chassis. They call that in the Corvette factory, they call it the marriage section. That's what they call it. They call it, we're marrying this Corvette together. Which is a really interesting way of putting it, because you know what? In marriage, that's pretty similar to what goes on. The men are the chassis, right? We're the grunters, and we're the with enough power there, as he said it, to be a little bit dangerous, but we're living life. And that's the chassis, that's the grunt, yeah. And then you have the body, the double paintwork, the beautiful, the lovely, and here it is, the female. And God made the female and the male, and he's got the chassis and the body, and they are to come together in marriage together to make this. Now, he said this, if they ever come apart again, then they're supposed to never come apart again after they've been joined together. There needs to oil changes, and there needs to be servicing, and there might be some issues that might need the mechanic, and there'll be things like that. But the body and the chassis are never designed to come apart again. If they come apart, we call it a wreck. That's the same in life, in marriage. If the chassis and the body ever come apart again, it is a wreck. Something catastrophic has taken place to pull them apart. In Hebrews chapter number 3, I want to give you this because the purpose is, and I know we're going a little longer, but we're here and I'm trying to be helpful here. Hebrews chapter number 3. Verse 15 says, verse 13, oh man, I don't want to. Verse 13, but exhort one another daily, while it is called today, lest any of you be hardened through the deceitfulness of sin. We are made partakers of Christ if we hold the beginning of our confidence steadfast unto the end. while it is today, while it is said, today, if you will hear his voice, harden not your hearts, as in the day of provocation. You know when they provoked him in the wilderness? It was the day of provocation. How did they provoke God? By hardening their hearts. Well, what did they harden their hearts about? Well, God said, I've got a promised land for you. I've got a land that flows with milk and honey, and I've got a land that is a land of rest. Can you say of your marriage that it's a land of milk and honey and is a land of rest? There's a lot of people who say, my marriage ain't anything near milk and honey, and it definitely ain't rest. It's turmoil and strife and it's barrenness and it's dry. Okay, that's not God's intent for you. God's intent is a promised land, right? Right. How do you get there? Well, how were they supposed to get there? Well, they hardened their hearts in the day of provocation. They provoked God and said, you can't get us in there. Verse 16 says, for some, when they heard, did provoke. Howbeit not all that came out of Egypt by Moses, but with whom was he grieved 40 years? Anybody been in a marriage 40 years that feels like you've been in the wilderness? It's possible. It's possible. Was it not with them that had sinned, whose carcasses fell in the wilderness? And to whom sware he that they should enter into his rest? But to them that, and to whom, let me read that properly. And to whom sware he that they should not enter into his rest? But to them that believed not. So we see that they could not enter in because of unbelief. God has a promised land for marriage. It is supposed to be a land that flows with milk and honey. It is supposed to drink up the rain and give blessings, and it's supposed to be a land of rest. Marriage is designed by God to be a blessing, and so often it is not. And it's not God's fault that the marriage is not good. Our marriage, Rhiannon and I, it wasn't God's fault that it wasn't good for a number of years. It was our fault. We never entered in because of one simple thing. We did not believe. This is where people get in marriage. They have come out and they're stuck together and now it feels like they're in the wilderness. And they're living in the wilderness, it's dry and it's hot and it's... Lots of things can be said about that. They were not yet estranged from their lust. Lust plays a part in all of that as well. And you're desiring things and earnestly wanting things and you haven't got those desires in check yet. But here's the thing. When God showed them where they could come, the land that they could come to, you know what they saw? When they saw the land, when they spied it out, what did they see? They saw giants, big and tall, and they saw walls up to heaven. And you know what they said? We could never have this land. We're not able. The giants are too tall. The cities are too high up to heaven. We cannot conquer this. You know what they're essentially saying? This is what happens in marriage. Well, I could never have a good marriage with this particular spouse. I could never have a good marriage with Rhiannon because the problems are just too big. And you know what Rhiannon could say? Well, I could never have a good marriage with him because the problems are too big and the cities are too indefensible. We can't conquer these things. These are well-fortified issues and we will never get the victory over these things. The problems are too big. Now, let me ask you this. Are the problems really legitimately too big for God? They're not. How are you supposed to conquer that land and get the land of rest that flows with milk and honey? By faith. To actually say, God, you are well able to take my leaving and my cleaving and to turn it into weaving. God, you're able to do something in my marriage that I know I can't do in my own abilities and my own strength. And it takes faith. Do you need two people for that? I would say it would help. But you know what you actually need? At least one. At least one to say, God, I feel like I'm in the complete wilderness here and I feel like this is dry and barren and I don't know if this is ever going to get any better. But God, I know that this is not where you intend for me to live and to dwell, that there is a place that is promised of rest. And God, I don't know how to get in there, and it seems like those giants are way taller than I can ever going to be able to conquer my own abilities. And God, those cities are so fortified and so built up. There's no way to penetrate the problems. They are defensed cities, God. I don't know, God, but I trust you. God, I think you're able. God, in fact, God, I know you're able. I know you're able to bring us through this wilderness and bring us into the promised land. Now, let me ask you this question. Your marriage, wherever it is right now, do you believe that you have gone as far as possible that God can bring you? Be careful how you answer that question. Because the person who does not have faith says, this is as far as we can go. We can't go any further. This is where the journey ends. And you die in the wilderness. But the person says, can you go any further? Can I? Probably not, but I know my God can carry me and carry us. And there's more ground and more territory to claim. And God, we can go further, and the grass can be greener and things can be better. And God, I know that we can enter into a land of rest as you intended for us to live. So it's a lack of faith that says, this is the end of the road. I can't go any further. This is it. But it's belief that says, God, you can do what we can't. Enter Caleb and Joshua. We are well able. We can do it. We can take the cities. We can take the giants. Our God is on our side. God, you've seen him part the river. I hadn't seen him part the river yet. You've seen him part the seas, and you've seen him defeat Egypt, and you've seen us fed us in the wilderness, and you spread a table in the wilderness, and manna and water out of a rock, and you have seen the most amazing things. I could just imagine Joshua and Caleb saying to them, you have witnessed with your very own eyes what God is capable of, and you don't think you can't do those giants and those cities as well? He can't do it. No, he can't do it. Joshua and Caleb is like, no, he can. He can. Our God is great. Our God is mighty and our God is powerful. He can do something. He can change things. He can bring those giants down. He can bring those cities down. If you believe. But let me say this to you as well. Believing isn't just saying, well, I'll pray about it. I want God to do a miracle. Now, did they stay in the wilderness? Here's the point. Did they stay in the wilderness and God bring down each of those cities and those giants while they were in the wilderness? No, they actually had to go there and face each battle themselves and go in great difficulties, set the battle in array, walk around Jericho. They had to actually go out and fight each battle. And each one individually. And there's going to be times in your marriage, there are going to be so many battles, and there's so many different things that need to be won. And you're like thinking, how do we conquer this entire land? One battle at a time. And it's not just a matter of saying, God, would you do it? And I don't want to get my hands dirty at all. No, God says, that won't work that way. You need to actually get involved in the battle. You need to go circle around Jericho. You need to go set the battle in array. You need to go do this. And as you go and fight each battle in prayer and in faith, God says, I'll bring it down one victory at a time. And all of the multiplicity of things that get into a marriage that just seem so many, just do one at a time by faith, seek God, and you'll see him come down, come down, come down, come down. And a land of rest starts to open up before you, and you have blessings that you never even labored for, that he gives you things that you never even thought were possible. And God says, here you go. I'm going to give this to you. But this takes faith. And so I'm not saying to you this morning, are you faithful to your spouse? That's not what I'm talking about being faithful. I'm saying, do you actually genuinely have faith in your marriage? Is your marriage based upon faith that you can trust God, take it to the bank, and then live out by faith that God will be true to what he says? It's past me. We've been in the wilderness too long. There's no hope. I'm telling you today, there is hope. There is hope wherever you are. It can be better. God offers better. Would you bow your heads and your hearts before Him?